Back in May, my boyfriend and I made a bet on a maple tree. How long will it take before it has all its leaves? He said mid-May. I said June. We made this bet after having spent many weeks looking out of our window onto the tree and our street. Any other year at this time, our street would have been entering the early phases of New England tourism. An invasion of young, well-dressed tourists would be coming from Boston or New York, eager to indulge in trendy food and IPAs. I would watch them, their faces deep in their screens, moving across the sidewalks like cattle. But this year it was different. It was quiet. The street was empty, but the world was not. I became especially aware of the birds flying from the maple tree onto our porch and then back to the maple. At times, the sounds of their chirps were so loud, I became amazed that I had never noticed this before. Was it simply no longer cars to interrupt their calls, less people, or was it my own lack of awareness? It was back in March that we first noticed the calm. Despite the profound chaos and fear that the entire world was feeling, our street was quiet once people were no longer commuting to work. I was no longer commuting, having been temporarily dismissed from my freelance directing gig at the local university. This job would have been a big step in my career, an opportunity to finally direct at the university level. Rehearsals had just moved from our cozy dance studio space onto the stage itself. This is the time during any rehearsal process when the actors and the director finally get to see their play come to life for the first time. We had a month before opening, and I was feeling confident and excited. These are the ideal feelings for any director a month before opening night. I was also feeling this rush of legitimacy and importance. With any luck, I was looking at a part-time adjunct teaching position. And eventually, if I played my cards right, a full-time job with benefits. For a theater professional in a state with only one major university system and no PhD, this was pretty much the top of the ladder for me. And although I was thrilled, I was also totally burnt out. It takes a lot of patience and ignorance to believe that one can make it as a theater director. It means sacrificing dinners with your partner if you're lucky enough to have the time to date somebody. It means waiting to have kids until the last minute. It means never having a steady paycheck or health insurance, or even a simple answer at the dentist when your hygienist asks you what you do for a living. It requires always balancing multiple jobs at the same time, with always that lingering fear of being late or just straight up forgetting. It means surrounding yourself with other eager, self-obsessed, and yes, sometimes desperate people, myself included, who are just trying to live their dream. By this point in my personal life, after having directed a solid amount of professional and children's theater, and let's be honest, it was mostly children's theater, I was feeling so fried that the idea of going to see a local production was the antithesis of a relaxing evening. I didn't want to sit inside a dark room and watch people walking and talking on a stage unless I was getting paid to direct it. Frankly, I just wanted to sit on my couch and watch an episode of Schitt's Creek while simultaneously playing Mario World on my phone. And so, having been temporarily dismissed during that fated week in March, after having been told, let's wait until the fall and see what happens, I was left like so many with this knot in my gut and waves of displaced anger, not knowing if I would ever work again. And let me be as honest as possible here. I was still employed in other capacities, and so was my partner. We didn't have kids. We were not essential workers. We were able to pay our mortgage and buy groceries. We had the luxury to stare out of our kitchen window every day without the added fear of being evicted or going hungry. And still, I felt this profound feeling of uncertainty and loss. So we started walking in the woods. I grew up in Maine. I was raised in a small town by aging hippie parents who spent their summers gardening while I mostly stayed inside watching Anne of Green Gables on PBS, like most girls of their generation. Occasionally, I would dress up as an orphan and run away to the woods. There, I would find a fuzzy patch of moss and wait for the fairies to appear. Sometimes I would sing, occasionally talk to myself. Maybe this was my first performance. As I got older, I found myself more and more inside dark theater spaces and further away from the musty sanctuary of the woods. Now, suddenly, as an adult, I was back amongst the trees and pine needles. And this time, I wanted to stay. As March turned into April, I became obsessed with the tracking of spring. I became aware of the minute changes that were happening week to week. The burst of a green in a brown field. The unveiling of a bud in a tree that I had not noticed the week before. I loved the feeling, the slight zephyr of a chill breeze against my ear and smelling the funk of a pond as it slowly shed its ice. Hearing the chopping of a woodpecker, the chirp of a chipmunk, the grunt of a gray squirrel. To be deprived of sun and green for so many months, I had forgotten what growth looked and smelled like. The season of spring was so much longer than I realized, and I loved every moment of it. And along with these new sensations, I realized that I didn't miss being inside of a theater. I didn't miss going to rehearsal, the commuting, tech rehearsals, the nurturing of actors, the anxiety of opening night. I didn't miss going to see a play either. The giving obligatory compliments to the actors once the play was over, the networking, sitting in boredom in uncomfortable chairs. This really surprised me. Wasn't I supposed to miss this? After having spent years working to carve out a career that felt legitimate and had merit, I had forgotten the feeling of just sitting amongst moss and pine trees without schedule or obligation. No deadlines. No fake smiles. After time in the woods, all I had to do was go home and make dinner. I lost the bet about the maple tree. The leaves were in full abundance by mid-May, and with the leaves, the new onslaught of masked tourists and a steady parade of traffic. It's October now, and the leaves are slowly turning yellow. I still haven't been inside of a theater, and frankly, I still don't miss it. I will long to put on a play eventually, I know. But for now, standing amongst a circle of pines, that's enough.